Hi, Lorcan O'Toole here for Fingal Community TV, and today we bring you a special report. We have gained exclusive access to inside the ringsend treatment plant. Many people in Fingal are wondering just what it is that's being proposed by the County Council. What does a wastewater treatment plant actually look like? Let's go and find out. Come with me. Okay, so with me now is Michael Phillips, project engineer with Dublin City Council, and he's going to just explain the various stages in the process and what the different installations are. Michael, do you want to give us a run through on the site here?
Well, Lurcan, what you have is all the sewage from the city, Dunleary and Fingal actually come right down here into the ringsend treatment works. Right. The small building over there with the low-lying roof is where all the sewage enters the treatment plant. And that's where the initial screens are, where all the paper and various other articles are taking off. And just on this side of the building is where all that rubbish is taken out into sealed containers. So it is. The liquid then passes into these tanks where what we call the fog process is carried out, and that is the removal of fats, oils and greases. And then we have primary settlement as well in these tanks over here to my right. The water then passes from the primary treatment into the secondary treatment, which are the tall tanks, and there they get biological treatment where further solid material is removed from the liquid prior to it being released into the bay. Now, the odours then emitting from both the fog tanks and the primary settlement are removed through the green pipes. And the odour travels along the green pipes into what we call an odour cleaning unit prior to it being released into the air, so that there are no odours being released. The solids, when they come off these various processes, are then transferred into the second building here that you see with the roof. And at that building that's where it is pasteurised at 160 degrees. That means it's sterilised, so all the pathogens are killed, and it's kept there for about 30 minutes. That then passes, the solids are then pumped from there into what we call digesters. And the digesters are where there's new bugs added that actually eat the solids, and they give off the gas. And that gas gives us power for 40% of the plant.
So these tanks here in front of us with the green pipes, would you tell us what's going on in there?
Well, originally when we built these plants, they were open tanks and they were a source of odour. And as a result, we decided that they had to be covered in order to, for the plant to perform properly and to the expectations of people that have to live in the area. They should not be subjected to the odours that were coming from it. So what we did was we have covered in all the tanks and any other sources as well within the plant. And what you see, the green pipes are where the odour is taken off, and the odour is then transferred along into what we call scrubbers or cleaning systems, and then it's clean enough to be let into the air. There should be no odour at all from the majority of the plant when it is in production. And people should not really be fully aware of what is going on within the boundaries of that plant based on the fact that there's good odour control. In the other areas where the odours were emitting, we increased, and we did not, that were already covered in. What we have done is we've increased the odour control equipment and also increased some of the treatment plant facilities so that the problems shouldn't arise.
Now, I know you don't speak for Fingal County Council, and I also know that it's very early in the planning process and the final technology has not been decided for the proposed Fingal plant. But would you be of the view that such odour controls will be an essential part of any new plant being constructed?
Yeah, there is no question about that. This plant, we are currently expanding it to its maximum of about 2.1 million. But from 2020 on, a new plant in the Dublin region will be essential. And what we are achieving today is, in relation to odour control, is absolutely critical and will be taken as the baseline really standard for any new plant to be constructed any place in the country.
To give me an idea of the speed, how long does it take from the time a given particle or quantity enters the system to the time it leaves in its final forms?
It would take approximately, we work on the basis of about 24 hours, so we do. On the basis that, we process here in the region of approximately 500 megalitres of 500 million litres a day, so we do. The building of these tanks, in actual fact, and the reason for that long process was because of an EU directive called the Urban Wastewater Directive, and that set the standards that the environmental standards to be expected of a river, and that set limits like 25 for what we call BOD, biological or oxygen demand, then COD and suspended solids. And our new plant, when it was designed at that time, was to meet that standard. Now further standards have been introduced, and there's also the EU directive called the Water Framework Directive. So constantly there are new standards being evolved, and society is demanding these new standards. And so the new plants have to constantly keep improving what is processed through it. And the City Council and any county local authority that is building a treatment plant has to adopt those new standards. And at the same time, it has to make it acceptable that the plant can operate in the environment where it is located.
And how clean would the water coming out be?
Well, the water entering, to give you an idea, that the water entering Dublin Bay here, we treat it with ultraviolet in the summer, which means it kills all pathogens going into the river. And the way the public would probably understand it is Dollymount, which is just outside the harbour wall here, gets a blue flag, which means that the quality of the water arriving at that beach is, of the highest standard.
Now, I know that there are some open bays just beside us. Could we go and have a look at those, and you could explain what's going on there? Yeah. So, Michael, what's happening here?
Well, when the particles get too small to actually settle out by gravity, what you do is you put the water into a tank like this, you pump air through it, which then causes the small particles to combine into larger particles. And then when we've done that for a period of time, we then stop the air going through it, and we let the particles then settle out so that they go to the bottom. And then we take the clean water off the top, and that is then ready for discharge into the river.
Could we just go and have a look now at the water being discharged? Michael, in the discussions about this, a lot of people in Fingal are agitating for or campaigning for tertiary treatment. Could you just explain to me what that actually means, what's involved?
Tertiary treatment is actually, as the word says, really a third method of treatment. And the third method of treatment is very much dependent on the constituents that are in the liquid coming in. For instance, in Ireland here, in Dublin, particularly as a capital city, we really have very little heavy industry. And now in other countries where you have a lot of metals, hot metals coming in, you need a very particular type of tertiary treatment to remove it. Our tertiary treatment in this country really is the removal of nitrogen and phosphorus. And that's where the tertiary treatment comes in order to achieve the standards required by whatever the environmental local standards are. And that's where the tertiary treatment comes in. But, the main part of the removal of the cleansing from the normal domestic and industrial effluent is in the primary, secondary systems.
So, Michael, this is the end product. This is flowing out into the Liffey.
Yes, this is where the clean water has passed through the ultraviolet treatment is in that building there, and in the summer we operate that to ensure that the water is of the cleanest quality, and it then passes from here down into an underground culvert, and it goes out into the Liffey from here. The pipeline heads out to the sea right here behind me, and around the red lighthouse that you see in the distance, and across into Sutton Bay on the north side, and a pumping station was constructed there. The importance of that submarine pipeline and the pumping station is that it ended the raw sewage outfall into the sea at the back of Howth Harbour. And so that area of Howth has been totally cleaned up, and now all that sewage is taken into this works here for treatment.
So here we are at ground level, where we can see the water more closely entering the river.
Well, this here now is the final stage, where in actual fact it has left the tanks, the high level tanks. It passes through the ultraviolet treatment here, and then it comes over the waterfall, which allows oxygen and air to mix with it, and then it enters down into the River Liffey.
Is that flow that we're seeing there, is that the normal operation flow, or does it ever get any higher?
No, that is the normal operational flow, and we can control it because this is not subject to rain, water conditions at all. What dictates the flow in this channel is what can pass through the whole of the treatment works.
You mentioned there rainfall. How does a heavy rainfall affect the operation of the plant?
Well, if you take the Dublin city, because it's an old city, the sewer system is what we call a combined. The rainwater mixes with the sewage. So in times of heavy rain, you get very large flows coming into the treatment works. If it exceeds a certain figure which says our plant cannot normally handle that, we then have overflow tanks which are on the far side of Pigeon House Road, and they fill up and we store it there. Now, if those tanks, if the weather is of such a nature that even those tanks fill up, it then overflows into the River Liffey, which we're allowed to do in emergency situations. Then when the next day, when the rain or whenever the rain has stopped, the water from those tanks and everything in them is pumped back into the treatment works, and the water is cleaned and reprocessed, so that we try to minimise at any time an overflow into the river.
How did the plant cope at the time of the major flood a few weeks ago, in the end of October?
Well, on that particular one, on the night of the 24th, yes, the tanks did fill up and it did overflow into the river. But because of the nature of the sewage in the plant here, or the wastewater, it did no harm at all whatsoever to the environment. There was a high tide that night, and all the overflow was taken out into the Irish Sea or Dublin Bay, and the environment did not really suffer because the dilution factor was of a quantity that gave no cause for concern.
You told me earlier that there was another output, is the agricultural produce that you derive from the materials here. Can we go and have a look at them now?
Yes, you're more than welcome.
Thanks. Michael, we're at pretty much the beginning of the process where the wastewater and sewage is entering the plant, and we've got these containers here behind us. What are they for?
Well, that building there is where the initial process of all the coarse screenings come off, which is all the papers and everything of a large nature is taken off. And it's then taken from that building and it is put into these sealed containers here, so that you have no odours emitted from the area, and then it's transported away for treatment.
So where do these unprocessable solids all end up?
They go for deep burial in a regulated landfill site, where everything can be checked and is that the EPA would have issued a license for.
So, Michael, this is the other end product of the process. Could you explain what's going on here?
Well, this is the final product where all the solids have been taken through the various processes that we've already mentioned. And what you see here is the fine solid that is now ready for spreading on land by the farmers in Carlow and Kilkenny.
So, Peter, we've had a good tour of this facility here, and it's very impressive, but it's huge. How does this compare with what you have planned for Fingal?
Well, what we're planning is a plant which will be approximately, at the end, when it's finally built out in 2040, approximately a third of the size of this plant, and initially will be in the order of 1/6 of the size of this plant, about 16-17% of the size of this plant you're looking at here.
Yeah. Behind you we can see these very tall treatment beds. Is that something that you'd see going into Fingal?
No, Ringsend has had to shoehorn its plant into the available site. We're looking at a somewhat slightly larger site in Fingal for a plant maybe a third to a sixth of the size, and we wouldn't anticipate building structures as high as this one here. They'd be single-storey secondary treatment areas. Thanks.
And in terms of the size of the plant overall, the footprint, how would Ringsend compare?
Ringsend is, I think, if I recall right, it's about 15 hectares. We're looking at a site of about 16 hectares with an extra 4 acres for landscaping. So overall we're looking at a 20 hectare site. But I just say about 4 of that will be for landscaping and shading and so forth.
We see here that the Ringsend plant has the advantage of being able to discharge its outflow directly into the river. You won't have that opportunity with the Fingal plant, so there will be a considerable amount of pipe work required. That's correct? Have I read the situation correctly there?
Well, currently they do discharge directly into the estuary where you've seen it from the secondary tank. In fact, we will be discharging directly into the Irish Sea, and in fact Ringsend will be discharging into the Irish Sea now in the near future, is their intent. But we will be discharging out directly into the Irish Sea, probably at least 2 kilometres off the shore.
And are you convinced that that will protect the beaches?
I am, because at the moment we are doing what's called 3-dimensional hydrodynamic modelling, just to give it a big word, to find out what is the optimum location in order to ensure that the effluent has dispersed and is no longer capable of causing any pollution. So that's why we are still not able to say yet where the ideal outfall point will be.
There's huge concern among the community of Dublin North. Everybody we have spoken to is terrified of what this plant will mean for them. How can they be assured that they won't have to suffer terrible smells, for instance?
Well, as you can see here behind me with these large green pipes and the covering in that's going on of all the treatment units in Ringsend, and the then treatment of the odour that's generated. This is in fact becoming standard practice, and in the newest plant we are building in Portrane, this is what we're doing. Everything is covered in and will be drawn through a treatment for the odour. We're currently retrofitting odour treatment in the other plants, and the new plant will be like that, and the odour generating areas will be treated.
Finally, Peter, what can you say to allay the concerns of the people of Dublin North about the impact that both the construction and operation of the proposed plant will have?
Well, we will have to have a construction management plan, and aside from that, in accordance with the recommendations of the SCA, we will have to put in place mitigation measures to minimise the impact of construction and the impact of the construction traffic on the local communities wherever we locate the plant.
So, what's my conclusion, having visited Ringsend? It's perhaps not quite as bad as I thought it would be, but it's still not something I'd want in my backyard. However, this is not my decision, this is your decision. You've seen what we've seen. It's up to you now to make up your mind about whether you want this facility in your area. You let your council know what you want them to do. If you're happy with this proposal going ahead, tell them. If you're not, make sure you tell them. For FCTV, I'm Lorcan O'Toole. Thanks.